Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Red Nine Projections. I'm Lucas, and we have Eric here as always.
Hey guys.
Welcome back to our second video in a very long time, in like 5 months, where we have to predict the 2023 Kentucky governor election between current governor Andy Beshear, a Democrat, and Republican challenger Daniel Cameron. And with that being said, let's get right into it. So, the state of Kentucky, for some background, is a very conservative state. This is one of the states that usually gets called fairly early on election night, given the fact that the polls there close very early. I remember in 2020, Kentucky was probably one of the first few states that was called by election projectors for Donald Trump because it is that very Republican state. Both senators are Republican, and almost all of the representatives are Republicans as well. But Kentucky has a Democratic governor. His name is Andy Beshear. He got elected in 2019, narrowly defeating incumbent Republican governor Matt Bevin, who was very unpopular. He barely won in a 2019 special election. This year, he's up for re-election again against the Attorney General of Kentucky, Daniel Cameron. Now, Beshear, despite this being a very conservative state, is actually quite popular. And part of that happened as a result of his handling of a hurricane that I believe happened. It might have been last year, or it was either this year or last year. He handled the hurricane very well, according to public polling, and people thought that he was kind of there for the people. And they think that he was doing a very good job with it, and his approval ratings were quite high. And this is true even among Trump voters and Republicans. As this article shows, he is one of the most popular Democratic governors among Trump voters. And this is a very interesting case where people would usually assume like a Democratic governor in a very Republican state would be not very viewed as popular. But Andy Beshear kind of is different. Andy Beshear is kind of viewed as a pretty popular governor so far. The other thing to note is Andy Beshear is a more moderate candidate, which typically is the more successful type in a state that has the opposite partisan lean. Being a more moderate Democrat in a Republican state can probably earn you greater appeal for those other groups of people. The other thing that we do have to note is that even though Kentucky has a Democratic governor, I believe the two chambers in the state legislature are held by supermajorities of Republicans, so the governor doesn't actually have too much power because the state legislature can override any veto that the governor has. But as it shows here, he has a very high net approval rating, with 60 to 35, which is honestly extremely impressive given how Republican the state is. So now I'm gonna give it over to Eric now, who's gonna discuss the challenger.
Yep. So this is Daniel Cameron. As Lucas said, he's the current Attorney General of Kentucky. But before that, he had a pretty standard rise to where he is. I think he worked for Mitch McConnell as some sort of for some sort of legal position. I think some sort of clerk for another administration. I think when he ran for Attorney General, he was also endorsed by Donald Trump. So he's, going down the line as a very typical conservative Republican in a state like Kentucky. As Attorney General, he kind of stuck to that title. He did a lot of things that any usual Republican official would do. I think when it came to more like unique issues to Kentucky, I think like for example, he didn't charge the officers that shot Breonna Taylor. He acquitted them. He didn't decide to charge them. And also, he fought with Beshear actually on a lot of COVID regulations that Beshear ultimately turned down because, he's on top of the authority. And other than that, he follows a very typical conservative legislation and type of carrying out of business.
Overall, I should also note that Daniel Cameron was endorsed by Donald Trump in 2020. But it should also be noted that Daniel Cameron actually has been running a great campaign so far. A lot of people think that the ads that he's been putting out have been more so attacking Biden and trying to tie this to like national politics than actually focusing on the issues in Kentucky. And this is honestly kind of something similar to what we saw in the 2021 Virginia governor election, where Glenn Youngkin kind of focused on the bread and butter issues happening in Virginia, and then McAuliffe was trying to tie Youngkin to national politics and Donald Trump. Daniel Cameron's doing like the opposite here, but instead of tying, his opponent to Trump, he's tying his opponent to Joe Biden, which, as we saw in the past before, might not be too successful given that um voters typically probably care more about those local issues impacting them instead of trying to nationalize the race. Um, but yeah, he is a very Trumpist traditional type. I don't want to say traditional, but he's like the typical, Republican candidate that is being run. Um, in terms of polling, I think that in the past it did look like Beshear was leading him a lot more, especially within internals. And the thing is that threw us off here was that, first of all, we don't have much polling in the state right now. The other thing is the places where Beshear was outrunning Cameron, they were Republican internals, and that probably got Cameron pretty scared, because if he's like losing in his internals, that doesn't really bode well for, I guess, the state and his chances in general. And then also the recent poll shows a very different picture than what we saw from before, which was Beshear generally leading, and Emerson College, which is actually a generally good poll, showed Beshear actually down by 1 point. So this makes us wonder, maybe the undecideds broke a certain way, or maybe this poll wasn't as accurate. So we've been trying to think about this and think about what we should do for the prediction. I guess Eric, you want to start with your prediction here?
Yeah, sure. So the election is actually coming up. It's pretty soon. A lot of people in Kentucky are probably starting to get some research done. And as Lucas said, the undecideds are probably not probably, they do have to break if they're going to vote for one candidate or the other. But I do think overall that I think we're going to put this at a lead, anywhere between 1 to 5, probably in the 3% range. Beshear has he's built up a pretty good reputation as governor of Kentucky, and especially as Lucas described, his popularity soared, if stayed and soared during his handling of that hurricane that really affected the state. And overall, he's run a um, pretty uncontroversial campaign, people could say. And he has a lot to campaign off of because, especially the fact that he is an incumbent. So that is really helping him with his reputation and his brand name. And it is contested, definitely. Um, Similarly to the 2019 election, where he won by like less than a point, I think. But because he's built up the career and the term that he has a pretty good shot.
Yep, I agree with that. I think that Beshear has, the name recognition. He's run a pretty solid campaign against David Cameron. Sorry, not Daniel Cameron. We're in the wrong country. He also has been doing a fairly good job with his approvals, and in general, we think that he does have this slight edge here. But we are kind of debating what it is. I think it's gonna be pretty close given recent polling. But overall, I think probably a 3-4 margin. I agree with Eric here. I do believe that it's going to be about there. So lean Democratic. So in 2 days, we'll be finding out if this is correct or not. So thank you all so much for watching. We're going to see how this goes. If you like this video, please hit the like button. And if you like our content, please subscribe. It's been a while since I said that. So we'll see you in our next episode tomorrow.
See ya.